Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I greet you warmly as brothers and sisters in Christ.
No pun intended, huh?
No pun intended. I liked the prayer that ended the children's moment. God, we know that you are with us when we make decisions that require courage. It speaks so much to the word that I will share with you this morning. Let us bow heads in prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts come from you, be inspired by you, be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
I have a friend who shared with me his motorcycling experiences. That is, he told me about his motorcycling experiences when he was a young man. And it's a story I often tell because it meant so much to me to hear it. And it gives a kind of image that we at times in our lives need to carry us through. It's an image of daring, it's an image of courage, it might even be an image of recklessness, but this is how it is. I don't know much about motorbikes, so I don't know what their top speeds are, the varieties of them. But if his motorbike could go, say, 130 miles per hour, it's like taking it off the road, getting onto the dirt, and seeing if you can get to 120 miles per hour. But to do so, he said, you had to travel through a speed range where the motorbike would shimmy, the handlebars would shake terribly, the wheel would feel incredibly wobbly, and you had to hold on real tight to get through. But he told me, when you get through that period and you're into that top range, it's like really smooth and nice. I don't know if you have that experience, if you've ever ridden motorbikes, but it seems like a wonderful place to get to. Why am I sharing that with you? It's life indeed. But here, let's complicate life a little bit, because that's so good. We heard that children's story a while ago of Daniel in the lion's den, but cast in the aftermath of America's independence celebration. That was it just last week? Yes. And I'm still in the glow, I'm not sure of the fireworks, but I'm still in the glow of the independence celebrations. And I thought, what would it look like to map America's history? It really was too much work, actually, to try and follow every SCOTUS decision for quite a few years or decades or even centuries back, because there are so many of them, and it is a habit to define the times through SCOTUS decisions. I had to do something easier, and so I thought, what are the big themes that connect to the ways in which in America we identify the nation's character? We identify the nation's purpose. And of course, since I wasn't raised in the American educational system, I came up with the ones that are top of the list in the popular mind. So I thought about terms like prohibition. And I learned that some people are really glad that's over. And that there might even be a national beer. I was learning about beers like Roosevelt, Stars and Stripes. I don't know if you know those, but a number that carries some kind of national brand. But then I moved on, and this is not in sequence, in chronological sequence. I also thought about the Jim Crow era. I thought about McCarthyism and what that meant and how it defined America in terms of freedom, helped to define, in terms of not being communist, over and against Russia. I thought about eras like that. And there were so many of them. Racism, and racism tied to a manifest destiny that meant expansion from sea to shining sea, and then spilling over into the rest of the world in an adamant imperialism, and a righteous imperialism in terms of the American identity. But I'm not here to note that. What I was looking for is, what are the characteristics? What are the markers of each of these times? And I realized that none of them carried anything as complex and as inundating as this period in time. Some might even call it the age of Aquarius coming to fruition, when the quality of human fellowship has deepened and the boundaries are breaking. And oh my gosh, when the boundaries break, then all kinds of intersections and overflowings happen, and we contact each other in ways that are sometimes pleasant, in ways that sometimes feel damaging and hurtful and painful, but somehow it's that motorbike. Hopefully we're riding on to that smooth place. It's a strange time. The biggest issues have been racism and homosexuality, LGBTQ rights. But somewhere in the shadows, every now and then propping up their heads, are issues like able-bodyism. Last week, I think we spoke about mental health issues. We still have gender issues. Certainly, transsexuality is coming into view. Race continues, class continues. What are we doing with the poor? What are the poor doing to us? Immigration issues. And what a motley collection that immigration issue is. And if we're not careful, sometimes we find ourselves in different positions all over the place. In one moment, for example, one can be an LGBTQ minority. In the next moment, you can be a white majority with your LGBTQ self. At another time, you can be a woman. And another time, you're a white woman. At another time, you're a poor man. And you turn again, and you're a poor white man, as distinct from a poor black man. The point is that in every one of those instances, any one of us as individuals can find ourselves in a different relationship to the centers of power and privilege that define our existence. And it's hard sometimes to plant your feet and say, I am altogether this and I am not at all that. Because at times you're one or the other. And power exerts a kind of centrifugal force that pulls us to itself. Sometimes we move with willing acquiescence. Sometimes we move with stubborn acquiescence. Sometimes we're altogether resistant. Sometimes we resist with petulance. Sometimes resistance is not the way. But we're not stable. Rarely are we ever in the same place. And you wonder, dear God, who am I? Who are we? As the wheels of our nation turn, and we find ourselves in these different positions on the power spectrum, on the privilege spectrum. So that was my curiosity as I thought about sharing with you this morning. There's a passage that I opted not to read because it is a weird passage. It is a very strange, a distasteful and bizarre passage. And it's found in 2 Samuel chapter 6. And it could have been a lectionary reading for this morning, but it was interesting that the other lectionary reading that we didn't choose actually goes up to verse 5, and then it picks up again at verse 12. So there's a section between 6 and 12 that's not to be told in church. So I thought I'd tell it. So the Ark of God, of the covenant, is going up to Jerusalem. And it's been put on a donkey cart. And it's wending its way. And there are two guards of the ark. And suddenly the ark looks a little shaky. And a gentleman, a hapless human being by the name of Uzzah, puts his hand to steady the ark. And oh my gosh, according to the narrative, God kills him. That's bizarre. One moment, he is this righteous guy who is a guardian of the ark, and the next moment he is, how dare you touch it? And I think about that with me. How as we draw closer to power, power can turn us around even when it's God's power. Can turn us around. One moment you are virtuous, the next moment you're a pariah. One moment you're worthy of life, the next moment you're worthy of death. I thought it was a little severe. That God sounded a little off. Or rather, I should say, the imagination that created that narrative or shared that narrative seem to have some really strange ideas about God. The problem is that they have persisted to this time. They haven't gone away. Not quite. So that's where I thought, God has some kind of alchemy going. Some kind of alchemy that constantly destabilizes us. Constantly turns our comfort into discomfort. And our discomfort into comfort. Until it becomes discomfort again. So if you're feeling a little off yourselves as you look at this time, where you're never quite sure where you live in relationship to privilege, perhaps you are close to the alchemist. Perhaps. So let us look at Amaziah and Amos. Amaziah, in the reading that we actually had, Amaziah was a high priest at the Bethel altar. That's not innocent. The altar in Bethel was set up to compete with the altar in Jerusalem. And the King Jeroboam in Israel wanted his altar to ensure that he could outdo King Uzziah in Judah. So the altar was not only religious, it was political as well, and tied to the fortunes of Israel in the king's eyes. So see it. We quote Amos about let justice roll down like waters. Amos came from Tekoa. Tekoa is in Judah. He chose to go to Israel and tell the Israelites how bad they are. And they weren't happy about that. Israel was having a very prosperous, peaceful time under Jeroboam. And here comes this dude telling them, you're all wrong. God doesn't like your worship. God doesn't like you. And it's thought that the Israelites thought that they were prosperous because they were doing right by God at the cult, at the altar. That prosperity was their reward for being righteous. And here is this little upstart from down in Judah that's not doing as well as Israel, coming up there to tell them that God does not like your sacrifices, God does not like your offerings. What God wants is righteousness. And then here comes Amaziah. You remember what Amaziah did in the reading? Amaziah, I imagine, is talking, it could be Amos, but Amaziah is talking, is in the presence of Amos. But he sends a word to the king. See, he's right. He's a priest at the altar. He is right to be on the side of the king because this is the king's altar. He is a civil servant as priest and as prophet. So he is right. Tell King Jeroboam that there's an upstart from Tekoa in Judah who is preaching against you. Treasonous is he. He needs to be stopped. But the way the story gets told, as soon as Amaziah sends to Jeroboam, he turns back to Amos. And I don't know what tone of voice he used. I couldn't figure it out from the text. And I thought it could have been, Amos, get your butt out of town and get it back to Tekoa. Leave Bethel alone. Or it could have been, Amos, you're my friend. We're prophets together. And I think it would be good for you if you actually went back to Tekoa. Go back to Tekoa, go eat there, go prune your trees, look after your flocks, but stay there. I don't know whether Amaziah was Amos's friend or righteously angry on behalf of Jeroboam. I also don't know whether Amaziah was Jeroboam's faithful servant or betraying him behind his back with Amos. So that I can see Amaziah caught between two goods and caught between two evils and turning, spinning, trying to be one or the other. And he can't be one without being the other. He can't be a betrayer without being a true friend. And he cannot be a faithful servant without betraying a possible colleague. That's the kind of world we live in. Can you see it? That's the kind of experience we sometimes have. And it's rough because it's difficult at times to know where to place our loyalties in the scheme of our civil and political and social life. And you know what Amos did? You should read the rest of Amos 7. I'm not going to tell you all that Amos did, but he sounds like some of our Christian friends. But you read Amos 7, 16 and 17, and hear what he has to say to Amaziah. It's not pretty. But I'm being told to tell you. But I'll pass. But what I will share is that Amos walks up and he mutters. He mutters something like this. I'm just a shepherd. I just look after the flocks. I'm not really a prophet. I look after trees too. I was minding my own business in Tekoa when Yahweh called me and told me to come do this work. That's why I'm here. And by the way, in the name of Yahweh, curse, 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 curse. That's verse 16. Amos understands that God has called him. And if I return to the Alchemist, God has called Amos to be an upstart and a troublemaker. So much for peace. So much for versions of love. God has called Amos to be an upstart and a troublemaker. And he didn't call him because he was an exceptional human being. He might have been a wealthy businessman. He might have been a struggling businessman. He might have been a struggling farmer or a very successful farmer. We're not really told. But he was going through the ordinariness of his life when God called him to be an upstart and a troublemaker. Because where justice is going to roll down, where righteousness is going to flow like a mighty stream, the status quo has to be disturbed. John the Baptist found that out. He disrupted the status quo, and though Herod loved him, when Herod's daughter said, I want John's head on a plate at the behest of her mother, her dad just said, please, have them bring me his head. That's what they did to upstarts. That's what could be done to upstarts. John the Baptist discovered that late in the day. But he too was an ordinary person that Yahweh called. We too are ordinary people. President Obama is not here this morning.
No. Last week.
Last week?
Yeah, last week.
Not even last week. I don't know who we are altogether. But for the most part, and perhaps altogether, we are ordinary people called in an extraordinary time to look out for justice, to seek righteousness, and to recognize that when we do that, the powers that be are not going to smile at us. And in the corporateness of the Christian life, some of the powers that be that will not smile at us are our brothers and sisters in Christ, who have been close to power and have found that the truth they once held dear is now regarded as corrupt. It behooves us to be sure that in our time we choose the things that are loving, righteous, just, and restore reconciliation and peace amongst human beings. and be aware that we are close to the alchemist when we do that. The alchemist who suddenly turns, at the turn of the earth's rotation, turns our own righteous stance at a particular time into something that needs to be questioned. So we can't be settled, and we can't be at peace. Peace meaning here, we can't be in denial about our proximities to power and the alchemy of power and the alchemy of God's power. But I have one suggestion to close with here. One suggestion. And it is this. We have been celebrating hospitality here. I believe it is true that when we are hospitable to each other, we cannot forget each other when we walk through those doors. We will not forget that we are not issues, that we are human beings, that we have sung together, we have prayed together, we have listened to each other's prayers and concerns. We have been in God's alchemical presence together. When we walk out through those doors, in our separateness, some of us are immigrants, yeah. Some of us are single parents. Some of us are gay couples. Some of us are gay parenting. Some of us are straight couples. Some of us have alternative abilities to able-bodiedness. Some of us are old. Some of us are young. Some of us are new into our friendships. Some of us are long in those friendships. We walk into the world as different people, but we walk into the world as people who have been united by a liturgical experience, united by a particular denominational history, united by this congregation's history of being willing to be disruptive when wrong is ruling in the land, and to create change. When we walk through these doors, none of us is an issue. We're all human beings, subject to the same alchemy. Let us love each other, because the God who is an alchemist will create these plateaus where everything is smooth for a moment, and we can enjoy each other and know the bonds of fellowship and care within and without. And we will know indeed for a moment the peace that passes all understanding until something comes up and touches the ark, and here we go again. Peace be with you.
And also with you.